As with most things, there's some truth in it, right? But some women can't multitask too. Anyway, we're not going to get into that right now, are we? Yeah? Stereotyping of gender roles. Okay, so I think it's working. I'm just slightly paranoid.
We can re-record it if it doesn't work.
Hey?
We can record it again.
No, I'm not doing that again. Truth only happens once.
That's true.
So, subject is separate from object in the traditional 20th century media model, right? In the more complex model, which I'm calling complex agency, yeah, structure and agency overlap. We are all in the structure. We're participating in the structure, which gives us agency. Yeah? But you might want to think, oh well, fine. Structure's much bigger than agency. Yeah, there's all sorts of ways of interpreting that. Yeah? So that political subjectivities are much smaller than structure. Yeah? Because we must not completely reject this model. Yeah? But we need to complexify it, complicate it. Yeah? We, as individuals, can understand power as outside us. Just think of this relationship now. I'm playing the role of a teacher. You are internalizing what I say. Are you going to believe everything I say? I hope not. And if you did believe everything I said, that would be a very subject-object relationship. That teacher truth. Student learn everything teacher says. No, so you're filtering. And this is you. In a complex way, you're filtering what power says. You're filtering it. It's complex. You're deciding I agree with that bit, I disagree with that bit, I reject that bit. Or I partly agree. That's what I wanted to say. I partly agree with him, but I'm not sure. Yeah? So, I'm arguing that this is a bit too simple now. And in the age of, in the post-digital age, in the social media age, yeah, where traditionally in media, the producer is the powerful one, yeah, and the consumer, the audience, is powerless, relatively speaking. But now we're told that we are powerful, that we can be producers too. We, the consumers, can also produce media. Yeah? That's what's exciting about the internet, isn't it? About social media. Right? We have power. We can change history. Yeah? Together. Politically, subjectively. Right? So, going to the handout. If you look at your course outline, if you've already looked at it, you will have noticed that there's a lecture coming up called Political Economic Approaches and Pluralist Approaches. Well, let me tell you very briefly in advance what a political economic approach is. So, political economy is an approach that says you cannot separate politics from economics. And it has some qualities that we associate with liberal assumptions and some qualities that we associate with Marxist assumptions. So, trying to think of too many things at the same time here. So, political economic approaches. In Marx's day, Marx lived between 1818 and 1883. All his Marxist theory was based on, actually, did you know that Marx was a foreign correspondent at the beginning of his career? And he wrote journalists he wrote pieces of journalism, he wrote pieces of news for a German newspaper. But his main theory that led to Das Kapital and so on was based on him observing British industrial capitalism, and from the outside, he wasn't working for a British company. He was making notes and understanding the complexity of capitalism from the outside. And that led to his amazing theory, and it is amazing. It's very hard to understand, but it is amazing. But he was making structural assumptions that you can understand capitalism from the outside. Yeah? And he was only observing the early historical phase of capitalism, which is when capitalism was mass manufacturing. This is way before, 100 years, 150 years before, consumerism. So consumerism is what changes the model to a complex agency model. So he has a structural approach to the world. He sees power as being external to individuals. He sees it as being other, up there, godlike, yeah? And so on and so forth. So a political economic approach is only concerned with power as external, concentrations of power, yeah? And ownership. The people who own media institutions, albeit commercial ones or state ones, are the ones who have power. Yeah? And actually, in many ways, this hasn't changed, because even today, when we accept that Amazon and Google and Facebook are the most powerful players, it's Zuckerberg has a lot more power, even in the social media age, than we have here in this classroom. Right? That's a structural analysis. Right? What's Zuckerberg going to say? No, man, you're powerful. You know, I'm giving you, come on. Does he think we're all stupid or something? Obviously he does. Anyway, so the point is that a structural approach is only concerned with ownership. Now, one of the amazing theorists who I'm lucky to say, and many people do correspond with this guy on the internet, Noam Chomsky, in 1988, with Edward Herman, wrote an amazing book, The Structural Analysis of American Media, called Manufacturing Consent. Yeah? And he's not the only political economist of media. There are many more on the course, on the reading list that we're going to explore later, but he's one of the most famous living intellectuals. And how many of you have heard of Noam Chomsky? Okay, he's amazing. He's so amazing that, he speaks to very small people like me and gives me the benefit of his knowledge. Although I have to say, when I told him about my PhD thesis that I've just shared with you, he said, that's a really good idea, looking at alienation in the mass media. But when I wrote the PhD thesis and I used ideas that were related to Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida and Wittgenstein, he doesn't like it. Because he's a structuralist. I'm not a structuralist. My definition of journalistic agency is that individuals do matter. But Chomsky believes in objectivity. He actually believes in objectivity. Which is not to say he's wrong. He just belongs to a different generation. He's 40 years older than me. Right? So he's lived through a different historical period that leads to his analysis. So he talks about ownership. He talks about 5 filters that commercial, institutional... You see, it's very easy, isn't it, to say, okay, look at the world. Chinese media, bad. American media, British media, good. BBC, good. It's easy to say that, isn't it? But it's not true. Because what he's saying is that liberal democratic media in France, Australia, America, and Western Europe have 5 filters to filter out truth and to manufacture consent. And those filters are the ones that I'm going to show you a clip in a moment of a little piece that was made by Al Jazeera. The 5 filters are called ownership. Yeah? So these are all examples of structural media power. Ownership, advertising, yeah? Media elite, objectivity again. FLAC is basically censorship. It's leaving out people who challenge power. And something that we definitely talked about last week in the first lecture in the context of broadcast media, othering. So one of the big purposes of the media, and this is where Noam and I definitely agree, is alienation, to other the political enemy, yeah? To promote your own political cause. So othering, objectification, and making foreign. So what I'm going to do is only like 5 minutes this clip. I'm going to show it to you and I'll pause it and I'll try and explain it as clearly as I can to you. But it's actually very good, it's self-explanatory. I think you'll understand it yourselves quite well. Here goes.
Easy Google, that's really awesome to show you. The cozy app you'll always have voted for is just like you to search up beep, beep, beep.
Propaganda. Many use the word when talking about countries like North Korea, Kazakhstan, Iran. Countries viewed as authoritarian through the lens of the Western media. Press freedom, freedom of thought. People use those terms when talking about countries like the United States, France, Australia, democracies. In 1988, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that media acts as a check on political power, that media inform the public, serve the public.
Okay, the notion that media act as a check on political power. What does that mean? The notion that media act as a check on political power. Yeah.
The idea that media will call out the powerful when they're being wrong? Or
This is the beginning of journalism, of news in any country in the world. It was always supposed to critique, to monitor power. That is the job of journalism, not to be in bed with power. So what the liberal democratic media do, they say non-liberal media, China, Russia, and so on. What was the other country that I was going to say? North Korea. Pardon? North Korea. You know, they're all propaganda. Whereas we know how to make news here. We do it objectively. Yeah? No, we don't. It's clever at making us believe. This is what Ken Loach shared with you last week, when the clip that I showed you, that BBC News is so constructed as looking truthful, you know? But we fill in the missing link. If we believe that it's the truth, then it works, right? So this is how our consent is manufactured. Yeah? So the job, the traditional job of journalism is critical. It's always to be outside of government power and commercial power, outside of state power, to be independent. As soon as you have a commercial news company or a company that's run by the government, and indirectly I'm talking about the BBC here, then you do not have independent media, right? This is a basic definition that we'll come back to later in the course. Jürgen Habermas, it's called the public sphere. Yeah? The public sphere has to be outside of private capital and public state power. Yeah? It has to be a space for the people. Right? So what the West does is it creates the illusion through the media of transparency, of objectivity, of truth. Doesn't mean it's the same. It is. Right? So let's continue.
So that we can better engage in the political process. In fact, media manufacture our consent. They tell us what those in power need them to tell us so we can fall in line. Democracy is staged.
I mean, this is interesting. Democracy is staged? Hang on a minute. No, democracy is the workings of the best political system in the world, isn't it? It represents the people. Staged means fake. What did Mahatma Gandhi, the most famous Indian 20th century leader, say when he was interviewed by a foreign correspondent in India? He was asked the question, what do you think of Western democracy? Can you guess what he said? He said it would be a good idea. Right? He's still with us. He's changing the light. My God. You see? Something weird's going on. Do you believe in ghosts?
With the help of media that work as propaganda machines. Media operate through 5 filters. The first has to do with ownership. Mass media firms are big corporations. Often they're part of even bigger conglomerates. Their end game, profit. And so it's in that
Profit over people, profit over information, profit over education. Yeah? Entertainment over information. This is what it means. Yeah? This is the world we live in. Yeah? Everything is filtered through profit. If it doesn't make profit, it's worthless. Truth is worthless in the mass media, capitalist, commercial world if it doesn't fit into capitalist truth. Yeah? This is a structural point of view. Yeah? Capitalism is outside us, controlling our lives. We can do nothing. We're powerless. Yeah? Even though we know capitalism is destroying the world, we can't stop it because we have a structural assumption about the world. Yeah? We're outside power. We aren't power. We're powerless.
interests to push for whatever guarantees that profit. Critical journalism takes second place to the needs and interests of the corporation. The second filter exposes the real role of advertising. Media costs a lot more than consumers will ever pay. So who fills the gap? Advertisers. And what are the advertisers paying for? Audiences. And so it isn't so much that the media are selling you a product, their output. They're also selling advertisers a product, you.
In the social media age, you are the product. You are free labor. You are selling your freedom online to capitalist commercial power and political state power. Because look, this is where we still need this model, because what it's saying is that if you put all your information on Facebook and you don't care what you put on Facebook, you're just making yourself into an object for advertisers. But you're choosing to do it. That's your agency. You're giving your power to advertising power, right? But you're tricked because most people don't think it's a problem. I've got nothing to hide. I'm a good person. I like using Facebook, right? This is how clever capital is in the media, right? So if you don't use Facebook, then you're more of a complex agent. Yeah? Sorry, I should have put subtitles on.
How does the establishment manage the media? That's the third filter. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity.
That needs unpacking. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity. What does complicity mean? It means that journalists are not separate from power. When they are working for commercial companies or state companies, they are power. They're not independent. They're in the pockets of power. Yeah? They are complicit with power. They are in bed with power. Even unconsciously. Right? You might think you're being critical and independent, but you might still be representing power. Yeah? This is the power of it. So you're complicit. So from a Marxist structural perspective, you can resist power by being a Marxist. Chinese history, look what happened. But from a complex agency model, we're all inside capitalism. So therefore, you can't resist it because it's in you. Or it's a split in you. We're all split between being structuralists and independent agents ourselves. Right? Don't worry if it seems too complex or confusing, because this is one of the central threads of the course that we'll be coming back to many, many times in the next 20 weeks or so.
Governments, corporations, big institutions know how to play the media game. They know how to influence the news narrative. They feed media scoops, official accounts, interviews with the experts. They make...
So what she's saying is that, we'll talk about this when we talk about news next week. No, is it? No, it's not next week. It's probably next term. BBC News in particular, but most news is always about experts telling us what the truth is. Yeah? It's always about experts. Who are these experts? These are experts who are heads of corporations, they're politicians, they're bosses, they're academics. They have a particular perspective on power. Yeah? These are academics representing people who haven't had the same experience. This is basic Marxist analysis now. The trouble with power is it hasn't suffered. The trouble with Donald Trump is he doesn't know what it's like to be a homeless person. He hasn't had to live through that. He doesn't know what it's like to be black. He doesn't know what it's like to be a woman. Yeah? That's why he's such a fucking idiot. He doesn't listen to anyone. Right? But he's one of the experts. He's a businessman, blah, blah. And therefore he goes to the top of the American political establishment. It's annoying, isn't it? It's quite weird. So yeah, let's continue. So all I was saying is that objective news is the perspective of powerful people. Powerful people like the world because they're benefiting from the world, they're exploiting the world. Powerless people are more resistant. They want to change the world so it's fairer. But why is it that their perspective is not an objective perspective? Think about it. That's a Marxist analysis. It's a structural Marxist analysis.
themselves crucial to the process of journalism. So those in power and those who report on them are in bed with each other. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. Your name won't be down. You won't be getting in. You've lost your access.
This is such a crucial point. If you say anything bad about capitalism or power, they won't speak to you anymore. Yeah? They won't give you information. Your job as a journalist is partly to report what powerful people say. If you say something that a powerful person doesn't like, he's going to say, fuck off. Right? You've got no source. This is how it works. So people that are undermining power, people that have the truth, people who are critical of people who are trying to represent people, know you can't come into the mainstream. You stay over there. Yeah? This is how the filtering system works. You've lost the story.
Lost the story. When the media, journalists, whistleblowers, sources stray away from the consensus, they get flat. That's the fourth filter. When the story is inconvenient for the powers that be, you'll see the flap machine in action, discrediting sources, trashing stories.
So this fourth filter, flak, is just basically pushing people outside of the regime. So in my first chapter of my PhD thesis is objectivity is rules of the game. If you don't follow the rules, you're outside, right? So John Pilger, Robert Fisk, the two most critical journalists that I interviewed, when I asked John Simpson, for example, who's one of the huge BBC representatives, what do you think of Pilger and Fisk's work? They're international journalists. They're not real journalists, they're bad journalists. Push them outside. They're not professional. It's not true. Actually, we need both kinds of journalists. But the fact that Simpson really believes he's doing a better job than John Pilger, the critical journalist, is a problem. It's a big problem. And strangely enough, what do you think John Pilger says about John Simpson's work? It's rubbish. Objectivity is rubbish. So they both diss each other. Yeah? But we need both. We need the perspective of power, we need the perspective of people.
And diverting the conversation. To manufacture consent, you need an enemy, a target. That common enemy is the fifth filter. Communism, terrorists, immigrants. Common enemy, a boogeyman to fear helps corral public opinion. 5 filters.
So the last filter is very, very powerful. I've slightly used my own language here on the handout. As you can see, I said othering, objectification, making foreign. It also includes orientalizing. I mentioned it last week. So Cold War narrative of othering communism, post-Cold War narrative of othering Islam. You need an enemy to justify all the build-up in money and military power, you know, because at the end of the day, military corporations are profit-making corporations just like media, you know. Wars are profitable, yeah? And so that's why the news promotes certain wars as well, yeah? Because it's good business. So, I don't know how persuaded you are by a very, very powerful piece of work by Noam Chomsky and Bern, I've forgotten his name, Herman, Edward Herman. It's a very powerful and important piece of work. I would never say, I'd never say reject a structuralist perspective. But what I want to show you next is, first of all, I'm going to show an example text by the BBC of a public service broadcast programme called Question Time. Has anybody heard of Question Time? Question Time is it's a Q&A audience programme in which you have a panel of experts, mostly political representative politicians, who sit in front of a live English audience, British audience, and they're asked political questions, and it's live, and you get the sense that here the audience have some agency, they have some power. But don't forget, just like I've got power here in front of you, you know, I'm the expert. So in this program, as you're about to see, I want you to think about, okay, if I had to describe Question Time according to either the subject-object model or the structure-agency model, which one would it be? Is it genuinely giving power to the audience to ask critical questions to democratic politicians, or is it politicians, as the clip just showed you, staging democracy? Is it pretend democracy? And if it's pretend democracy, it's back to the subject-object model. But take a look, see what you think. This is probably, arguably one of the best BBC programmes. It's the most public service. It's genuinely giving some kind of voice to people.
I'm Eddie Mayer, and now I'm on LBC every day, 4 p.m. till 6. That's 2 hours of you and me.
Tonight we're in Bishop Auckland. Welcome to Question Time. And with me here tonight, the Conservative backbench MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, leader of a group of Tory MPs who opposed Theresa May's plans for Brexit. The chair of the Labour Party, former president of the National Union of Mine Workers, Ian Lavery. Polly Mackenzie, director of the centre-ground think tank Demos, and Nick Cleggs, head of policy during the coalition government. The comedian journalist, former Labour Party advisor, Aisha Hazarika, and the columnist for The Sun, The Sunday Times,
A journalist.
and The Spectator, Rodland. Just before we take the first question, a reminder, you can join the argument from home using our hashtag BBCQT on social media, and we're also now on Instagram. If you want to follow us on Instagram, the numbers grow by the week. Benjamin Reeford, let's have your first question.
With Labour announcing that they are considering a second referendum, are they ignoring the will of the people?
This was announced at the Labour Party conference just this week. Ian Lavery, is that...
So what happens is, there you have it. I'm not going to show you anymore, it's not necessary. You've got the idea. So a political question, then each member of the panel answers the question. There's often strong disagreement because you've got a Labour representative, a Socialist representative, and you've got a Conservative right-wing representative, and they have very different answers to the question. And the people decide. And the people have agency, because part of agency is choice. Part of agency is intention. It shapes how you want to vote in the next general election. That's how democracy works. Yeah? But what you haven't got is you haven't got people on the panel. Normal people. They're still dependent on what power says. They still have to try to trust these experts. Right? So that's where you might bring in a subject-object model as well. Right? So, second part of the lecture today says, part 2. Oh, just to draw your attention to the pictures. So at the back you'll see a Media Reform Coalition representation of who owns the media. Just quite a nice, colourful representation of who owns the media in the UK, and you'll see that the biggest circles indicate that it's Sky, I don't even know what Global is, BBC, News Corp, that's Rupert Murdoch. Yeah? So you can quite quickly see that, if you take the biggest bubbles, yeah, that's like half, 60% is all owned by corporate power, right? That's hardly democratic, is it? And that's a structural analysis. You can make a very quick structural analysis. You can say, that's not fair. That's just corporate power, right? BBC, it's not corporate power, but it's government power, it's state power, right? Obviously, contrast that with the last picture, which I deliberately gave you, which is either somebody looking in a mirror or somebody looking using their mobile phone. But again, it's agency. It's you. It's the individual. It's reflexivity. Anyway, so to go to part 2, which I've called Foreign Correspondence from Subject-Object Paradigm to Complex Agency. So instead of considering this model says subject is completely separate from object. Yeah, there's this big gap between them. Consider them as two sides of the same coin. Yeah, subject, object. Yeah, a coin. Flip it over. That's what Marx did. Flip it over. Give the power to the people. Right? The fact that it's a coin means that they're not separate. The fact that people can be powerful or powerless, or in the middle, is a much more complex model of agency. Yeah? They're not separate. Do you understand? That's a post-structural Foucault-style analysis. Yeah?
So that's the subject. That's the other one.
Exactly that. And instead of thinking of subject-object, you could think of the coin as, and this is what I do in my research, objectivity on top, political subjectivity underneath. Yeah? It's two sides of the same coin, but they are not separate. We are all in power. We can all potentially be Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, in theory. You know? He is an individual. He's got too much power, we know that, just like Trump. But he is a human being. Right? At the point at which you see power as intransigent, like an object, it's unmovable, it's unchangeable, you're giving power. You're giving them power. If you say Trump is the end of the world, you're just giving up. Right? We have power. Yeah, that's our agency. We can change the world, in theory. So, this is where we bring in Stuart Hall. So look at part 3. So, what I mean about foreign correspondence is just like, you know, according to the subject-object model, the object is the foreign. Right? Now I'm saying complex agency says, no, the foreign is in us. Right? We're the foreign. Right? It's not just over there. We are the foreign. And how we see the foreign is how comes from us. How we choose as agents to see the foreign. If I see you as all foreign, that's because I choose to. I don't have to see you as foreign. I could also see you as human beings, like me. Right? That's a choice. That's my agency. Anyway, so Stuart Hall, last part, agency. So you can see his assumptions are rather different from structuralists. What he says is, when you understand the people, and that's back to, no, this was a question in the last lecture I gave. When you understand the people as all the same, powerless and passive, is that accurate? Who are the masses? If you're representing the masses as being all the same, that's actually a political assumption. The masses contain all kinds of political diversity. Yeah? Some people in the masses might like Donald Trump as well as like Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn, right? You can't just say you're all like that. Yeah? If you're a left-wing foreign correspondent, if you're John Pilger, if you're a critical foreign correspondent, and you fly into Venezuela, is it right that you can just say all these people are on the side of the president because he's a good socialist? Actually, some of the people don't like him. Yeah? But as soon as you represent the people as being all the same, then you are taking their agency away, because they should be able to represent themselves. Yeah? So even a critical foreign correspondent can fall into the same trap as an objective foreign correspondent, as just assuming that the other is all the same. The people are all the same. Power is separate from people. Even left-wing foreign correspondents like John Pilger separate people from power. Yeah? If you don't understand that, we'll come back to it later. Power is not just up there, over there, it's in us. Take a physical, take a kind of an allegory from the universe. You know, it's easy to look at the stars and say the stars are over there. We are the stars. We evolved out of stars. Yeah? It's part of us. So it's a more complex understanding of who we are. You know, also, there are many examples of the media acting as agents of pockets of resistance. So take the Arab Spring uprisings, Tunisia and Egypt 2011. Use social media to overturn right-wing dictatorial governments. So media can be used against power. It can be. Also, WikiLeaks Julian Assange clearly was a huge challenge to Western American power. Noam Chomsky, who I've introduced you to today, he's nowhere to be seen in the mainstream media. no one will talk to him. Well, that tells you everything you need to know about. He must be, he's marginalised, that's flack. Because he's resisting power, he can't be in the mainstream media. So, but he's talking about media. He wants to make pockets of resistance, and he has power. Chomsky has huge power because he's right, basically. Popular culture. Stuart Hall says, well, why is it that we're only concerned with really powerful media institutions like the BBC or CNN or Fox? Why don't we look at popular magazines, social media, crap newspapers, tabloid newspapers like The Sun? They're really, really popular. Reality TV, you know. These also have very powerful political ideology too. Yeah, power is not just in the big institutions. It's also in popular culture, low culture. Yeah. So even what you think is, you know, a lot of people say, well, you can't say that Hollywood is just political. It's just fun. No. The fact that it's so popular gives it huge power. Stuart Hall says, look at that power. Look at what that power is. Fake news. This is the idea that we've just suddenly woken up to the idea that news is actually fake. News is created. News is constructed. Right? So the argument that Al Jazeera give in this documentary that I'm about to show you is, don't watch the news, because news is all ideology. It's completely constructed. Yeah? And I kind of agree with that. I say don't watch mainstream commercial news. Go, you know, we'll come to this when we talk about news on the course later. Go to democracynow.org, an amazing independent American news website, democracynow.org. Yeah? It's non-profit making. It's very different from mainstream commercial news. There are many good news sites online now, yeah, that are genuinely independent. Let's watch the clip, and then we'll probably have one or two questions, and then we'll stop.
Ignoring the will of the people.
Well, I think the will of the people was...
Right, so... Stuart Hall is one of my favourite theorists. He's a Jamaican-born British theorist, and he was just very, very clever. And his work is still so important today. I mean, I wouldn't say that he's more important than Chomsky, but the difference between Hall and Chomsky is that Hall saw more complexity. He didn't believe in objectivity like Chomsky. He was slightly younger. I mean, he's dead now. And Chomsky's not dead. But he's kind of got a slightly younger approach, Stuart Hall, to Noam Chomsky.
We live in a world saturated with media. We see our reality through them. But these are not transparent operations. They involve the workings of power. Stuart Hall was an outsider, born in colonial Jamaica, educated in Oxford. He was out of place in both. He left academia, the literary canon, high culture, to become an intellectual of mass culture. What he did was controversial. He was looking at the power of mainstream media in representing race, gender, class, ethnicity, religion. Hall said those discourses are not innocent, that hidden in mass media is ideology. The media theorist's job is to find that ideology, expose it, critique it. The media's racialisation of crime, the patriarchal narratives on gender, the othering of immigrants, Muslims, the poor. The media are active agents in this process.
So what he's doing, he's not denying that the media have power from a subject-object perspective, but he's saying that audiences are active. we are the audiences, we don't have to accept power. Yeah? By learning about how the media operates ideologically, we can either not watch the media, or we can watch media knowing when it's lying to us. That gives us power. Yeah? The danger with a Marxist structural approach is that you just basically say all power is not in the people, and you actually give more power to people like Donald Trump than they really have, because you believe they're gods. That's the danger with Marxism. You actually think that power is separate from people, and you give more power to capitalist leaders and political leaders than they actually have. If you actually interview, if you're a good journalist and you interview, dare I say it, Donald Trump or Theresa May, you'll see there's a human being in there. Yeah? So, I'm not saying that they're good people, because they're not. But what I am saying is there's a danger from a structural Marxist perspective of understanding power as being godlike, and therefore you can't change it. You give up. We know that capitalism is destroying the world. If you're a Marxist structuralist, you say, well, there's nothing we can do about it, because that's what capitalism does. No. We believe in capitalism. We stop believing in capitalism, we can change the world. And you don't have to change the world in a Marxist way. You have been trained to think Marxism is a dirty word, right? And if your teacher says you should be a Marxist, you think your teacher is mad and stupid, right? That's your training. That's your ideological training. I am not training you to be Marxists. I'm training you to be critical. Yeah?
But what of the masses? The audience is watching. Hall broke with the presumption that the masses are dumb, passive. In fact, he questioned who the faceless masses even are. Some may accept the dominant meanings embedded in the media. Some may negotiate them. Others outright reject them. Where other media fields argue that messages are imposed on people from above, Hall said power is not as simple as that. He saw pockets of resistance that undermine dominant media narratives. Think of the bloggers in Tunisia, the graffiti artists of Brazil, Black Lives Matter. But Hall went further. He also told us to seek out stories elsewhere, in the lowly, despised spaces of knowledge. The gossip mags, the soap opera, the music videos. If you want to understand society, then maybe avoid the news. Those formalised spaces that house official discourse. Find different stories, different perspectives, different realities.
Okay. Any questions?
If
Yep.
people watch these videos and are informed of these things,
These videos?
for example, like this video,
Yeah.
I'm sure that people watch it, right? So that means that I hope quite a lot of people are aware of all of this control.
Are they?
Well, that's the thing, but if people do watch this, do they not understand?
Which people are you talking about?
Whoever watches this video, I don't know.
That's a
if
construction.
it is.
You're here because you're interested in media. You've already started thinking more critically about the media than I guess other people do.
Yeah.
But there's always a danger of regarding yourself as having superior knowledge to other people, because that's when you start to think of the people as the dumb masses and that you're clever, right? So we all need to participate in the idea of what the media is doing to us. You're not going to change media audiences by telling them they're stupid, are you? So, and that's one of the classic mistakes that Marxist media theorists have made. And that's what Stuart Hall's trying to challenge.
Don't they say that that's part of why Trump was elected, because the liberals treat the masses as stupid?
Perfect analogy, yes. Exactly. Trump is more interesting, in quotation marks, because he, as well as being a racist, misogynist bigot, he also represents the average stupid white American man. And so people identify with him. They say he's genuinely challenging traditional top-down political power. He's challenging, the Clintons. He's challenging Obama even as being black skin, white mask. Fanon talks so well about this. If you're interested in Frantz Fanon, I'm sure you maybe already know Frantz Fanon's work. Take a look. Frantz Fanon or Lewis Gordon.
How do you spell it?
Frantz Fanon. He was an Algerian political scientist who used psychoanalysis, Frantz Fanon, but also somebody who's very much alive and is brilliant, he's a personal friend of mine, works at University of Connecticut, Lewis Gordon, and he's one of the best experts on Frantz Fanon's work. So he's actually writing a book as we speak called Fear of Black Consciousness. It's amazing. It's really good. Anyway, any other questions? Well, let me allow you to think. Why should you immediately know how to respond to all this information if it's new information? You need time to think about it, and to develop and talk to each other and decide what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Okay, so thanks very much, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Yeah.
Can I just ask you a side note question? Would you say that Al Jazeera is a more credible news source than others? Or no?
That's a good question, because I've actually had friends that are like, don't look at it.
Oh no, I have friends who say watch Al Jazeera, don't watch all the other ones.
I have people that say the opposite.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's propaganda in a different
But
way.
then, I don't know.
it's complex. I think they were most critical when they reported the Iraq War in 2003. That's when they started, and we're talking about Al Jazeera Arabic.
Yeah.
And Al Jazeera Arabic was the only mass, it was reporting to the whole of the Middle East in Arabic the truth about what America was doing in Iraq. Yeah, that gave it huge power. That's why it was bombed by the Americans in the Iraq War, literally bombed. Since that time, typically they've become mainstream, they've become commercial, so they've become less critical. But some of their documentaries are still pretty good.
Yeah.
I heard people don't like them because they get their money from Qatar or something like that.
But that's the whole problem with the
It's always the problem.
Yeah,
Where's the money come from?
exactly.
You need money.
Mhm.
Even if it's bad money, it can be used for good purposes.
Mhm.
I think there's, on the ICC Undergraduate Foundations program, she studied media, it's a big family, but there's one of the Qatari families studying in IFSEMS. I'm not going to tell you her name. But it's a very big family. But, they're very much in bed with Al Jazeera too.
They practically own Al Jazeera. It's the same company.
They practically own the Shah.
I know, yeah. They own Harrods, they own everything now.
But if you are interested in Al Jazeera critically, take a look when you've got time at Al Jazeera English, and there's a show called The Listening Post that's presented by Richard Gisbert, who's a personal friend of mine. And every week he critically looks at news from all around the world, and he critically analyses it. It's very, very good. He's a Canadian former foreign correspondent. And I will be using clips from his shows when we talk about news later.
What was it called again?
It's called The Listening Post. So just go to Al Jazeera English online, click on The Listening Post. Every week on, I think it's Saturday, there's a new episode that maybe looks at, there's a brilliant one recently on how China is censoring the news about how it's imprisoning 1 million Muslims in West China, yeah, the Uyghurs, yeah, Xinjiang. You know about this, guys? Well, you won't know about it if you watch mainstream Chinese media. But it's very good. It's very good. So take a look. The Listening Post, Al Jazeera. I'll write it.
It's on the screen. Yeah.
Oh,
So it is. So it is. How amazing. And Al Jazeera. But this is, because Al Jazeera has Al Jazeera Arabic, it has Al Jazeera English. Al Jazeera Arabic is more radical. Al Jazeera English is very mainstream. It's pretty mainstream. I would say the Listening Post is one of the most critical parts of Al Jazeera English. But if any of you, I'm serious, if any of you are really interested in media and want to get a job working for Al Jazeera English, I can put you in touch with Richard Gisbert. I have students working for Al Jazeera, students that I used to teach working for Al Jazeera, as well as the BBC. So, yeah. All right, well, can we stop? See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.